It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Regular listeners know that I try to come out once a week, but it often ends up being 10 to 14 days whenever I can fit an episode in. But this one is only a couple of days after the previous show. I was fortunate enough to be able to record a absolutely delightful interview with my good friend Susan Gerbic, and she is in charge of, I think that's fair to say, Guerrilla Skeptics and the Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia and other things where her and her teams and people that help her are trying to do their best to put a dent into a lot of the woo that's out there, from psychics to astrologers to all kinds of things. But anyway, we're going to talk about that later. We're also going to talk about how to rebalance your portfolio as a theoretical idea. I'm going to have a segment on that a little later in this show. And we're going to talk about, and another reason to do this show right away, the Federal Reserve and yet another increase in the overnight Fed funds rate. But before we do that, I have a kind of a random off-topic rant, just something I've got to share with you. On top of all the other things that I do, I'm kind of sort of in charge, responsible for a meetup group in the Chicago suburbs for conversational Italian. Someone else started it years ago, and then they moved, and absolutely nobody wanted the responsibility of scheduling meetings, and no one, definitely no one, wanted the responsibility for paying for the meetup page, because that's like $100 every 6 months. I guess, I'm hoping Meetup's making a ton of money off of this, but I asked if people would throw in, and people throw in a couple dollars here and there, and I attend enough meetings and enough people throw in a few bucks that, generally speaking, I'm not out that much. And I just put in the first and third Tuesday of every month, and if I'm in the Chicagoland area, I'll go myself. If I'm not in the Chicagoland area, the rest of the people are on their own to find each other. We meet at a Panera. So it's pretty safe. It's pretty calm. It's not particularly organized, or there's no lessons. It's just nice people meeting in a Panera and sharing conversation. A good chunk of it in Italian, but every once in a while, we've got something to say, and we want to say it in English. So we're all friends. It's pretty cool. But all of them are still cool. A few weeks ago, I got contacted. Actually, I was in the airport in Vegas waiting to fly to San Antonio, and someone had sent me an email that wasn't in the group yet and said, "Hey, I found this group. I'd like to know more about it. Can I call you?" And my first thought was, oh my, I don't know if I want them to call me, because everything is in the description. It tells you that it's in Panera, and it has the address, and it has the time, and it has the date. It says we're going to be there just to talk. It says all ages are welcome, all levels are welcome. You can get food. You don't have to get food. And I'm thinking to myself, what is it that I haven't covered in the description and all the details? Oh, and of course, it says first and third Tuesday of every month, and that's what the meeting does. So I said, sure, call me. Here's my number. So they call me and they said, tell me about the meetings. And like I just did for you, I recapped the ideas that are on the meetup page. And they said, well, what's going to be like the topic or subject for the meeting on Tuesday? And I said, there is no planned anything. It meets on Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, And people who want to show up, and people that want to talk. And it's just very, very, very casual, very friendly, very nice. And they're like, well, I think you should have some kind of topic. And I said, well, if there's something specific that you'd like to discuss, bring it with you and we can go over it, whether it's a grammar point, like maybe how the gerund in Italian, il gerendio, works. Or maybe you want to review passato prossimo and the difference between using avere and essere in the passato prossimo verb tense. I don't know. Whatever it is you want, bring it up. We can talk about stuff like that. And she's like, well, no, I was kind of thinking it'd be good if you had a topic to discuss. And I said, well, I don't. It's just casual. Sometimes it's 4 people. Sometimes it's 15 people. And we'll break up into 2 or 3 groups and just chat. It's really chill. And then this person said, well, why don't you have something closer to Chicago? And I said, because this is where the group formed and this is where the group meets. Well, I'd like something closer to Chicago. And I said, not a problem. I will make you a co-manager of the meetup page, and you can find a location and you can secure the location, and then you can create a meetup on the meetup page and tell everybody where the location is and when to get there. And she says, I don't want to do any work. I knew that. I had a feeling that this was another person that didn't want to do any work. And it's one of those things that sometimes with things like this, there's plenty of people to bitch about what I'm not doing, but they're not willing to lift a finger more than just to call me and bitch about what I'm not doing. So the conversation went longer than I probably should have let it, because everything that I do or don't do became a complaint. And I told this lady, I was going to say nice lady, but I'm not sure she was nice, because she was like, the meeting's too early. Everyone there must be unemployed. Like, really? That's what you want to go to? But she wanted a later time. She wanted a different day. And I've had plenty of those. And when people ask me, can we do it on Thursday instead of Tuesday? And I said, sure. If you want to do one on Thursday, pick a day, pick a location, schedule it, set up a meeting in Meetup, and it'll be great. Oh, I don't want to do work. Okay, well, nobody else apparently, even the people that come regularly to the group, don't want to do any more work than what they're doing, which is why we do what we do. And I know that this is not unique to Italian conversation. It often happens with free thought, skeptic, humanist, atheist, whatever kind of meeting, camping. There needs to be somebody that really drives the meetings. And unfortunately for me, now I'm moving to Florida. I can still set up these meetings, but most of the time I won't be going. But I don't know. It just kind of struck me, and I felt like I wanted to rant, ruin your day, kind of like it ruined my time in the airport. I was so pissed off afterwards, because if all you're going to do is call and bitch, and you're not willing to put in the least amount of effort, maybe going forward, I just need to start off with fuck off. I guess fuck off and see if they can take it, and we'll go from there. Okay, that's over. Now let's talk about the Fed. On November 2nd, the Federal Reserve, aka the Fed, announced a additional increase of the Federal Reserve's Fed funds overnight lending rate. Whew, it's a whole bunch of words. I think I got it all right. The target range is now 3.75 to 4%. A year ago, it was pretty close to 0 to 0.25%. And I know that's wonky to have this little range, but that's just how it works. I'm not going to dig into that in this episode. But it's almost 4% higher than where it was a year ago. And the result to bond funds, particularly long-term, high-quality bond funds, has been devastating. It was predicted. I predicted it. Now, I've been avoiding long bonds for 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years. So I was avoiding long bonds before I needed to avoid long bonds. But the incremental reward on long bonds for the last several years has been 0.5 to 1% more than the short-term bonds, if it was that high at all. And now the amazing thing is the short-term bonds are paying 4 4 to 4.5, 4.6, and the long-term, short-term bonds are paying 4.5 to 4.6. Long-term bonds are paying closer to 4 or a little bit above 4. This is known as a yield inversion. There is often a correlation with yield inversion and a market value decrease. We already had a market value decrease. And of course, on the 2nd of November, the market reacted poorly, i.e. went down after the announcement was made. Not too surprising. And it seems like the market at this point just doesn't seem to want to be happy. The funny thing is over the last several weeks, the market's been trending up, but that generally gets ignored, and the big drop in one day of 2 to 3 to 4% makes all the news. So if you only hear these negative things, you could think the market just keeps going down, 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 and you've missed some of the ups. Anywho, we're back in the position where the market's down enough. U.S. stock market, as measured by the S&P 500, or the total stock market, particularly the U.S. domestic growth funds or a few international funds, I feel are now attractive. They're buying opportunities. And I will point out that at the end of the calendar year 2021, when the market was up 28%, 28% as measured by the S&P 500, not a single person called me and said, Phil, I made too much money in 2021. What should I do now? Nobody. And as I did my regular adjustments from time to time with all of my clients, I would call them up and say, hey, let's take 3% or 5% or 10% of all these gains and put it into the cushion. Most of them said, okay, Phil, that's why I pay you the big bucks. Let's go ahead and do that. A few of them more acting like a gambler that's winning, and you never want to take your money off the table when you're winning. And of course, after you've been losing for a while, there's no money left on the table. Anyway, that's probably a bad analogy and doesn't share the spirit of what I'm trying to do here. But what I'm saying is the market makes around 10% per year on average. If you get a great year, awesome. If you get a couple of great years, great. But when you get a run of 10, 12, 13 years where the market goes up, 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 and 21 and 20 and 19, the market was crushing it in a positive way. So I had, over the last several years, for regular listeners of the show, moved to slightly more and more conservative positions. We've increased the size of the cushion. We increased how long the cushion would last. We moved from 50-50 growth and value stocks to 60% value and 40% growth stocks. And for a couple of years, we were slightly underperforming. But now in this year, in 2022, we've talked about this already, but quick recap, the total bond fund right now is probably down 15 to 17% because of the exposure to risky bonds and long-term bonds, but the blend of bonds that I use in the cushion is down 9 to 10%. Still awful, but in a weird way, and I've done a segment on this, if you're in retirement, you're actually better off because the cash flow, the dividends that are being spun off from those bonds has increased dramatically, and it's going to get even a little bit better as the prices of those bonds might still go down a little bit more. And in the U.S. stock market, value is down 5 to 10, where growth is down 25 to 30. And that leads to people sending me portfolios, and I just got one in. I'm reviewing it for somebody where they have a third of their money in bonds, but over the last 12 months, they've lost 21% as of September 30th. And at that time, the S&P 500 was down 15. So how did they lose 21 and a half when the market's down 15? And so I'm going to go over that with them, and maybe I'll take parts of that. Anyway, I'm getting diverted from this Fed thing. The Fed made it perfectly clear they are not going to stop. They are going to continue what they're doing until they aren't. Now, that's the big question. The Fed has decided, and I think I agree with their decision, that they are going to keep putting pressure on the economy, even if that means we get an actual full-blown recession, because if interest rates are not, if inflation becomes normalized at 10%, it makes it very, very hard for anyone that's saving money. Even if you can make 4% on your bonds, that's not great if the cost of everything goes up 10% a year. So for stability of economies, 2 to 3% positive is great. You don't want deflation. You don't want big inflation. So they're going to keep raising rates. And in the meantime, there are going to be some things that are quite painful. One of them is that home loan rates, I think, are now over 7%. A year and a half ago, I refinanced my Chicago house at 3%. You can't do that now. So it's going to be much more expensive to get a house for the next several years. Will those rates go back down in several years? I don't know. Am I interested in intermediate or long-term bonds? Not yet. And part of that is because why would I put my money at risk of huge volatility swings in interest rates, or the interest rates changing and affecting a 20 or 30-year-old long-term bond fund, when that bond fund pays less than a short-term bond fund? So during a yield inversion, you don't want intermediate and long-term bonds. Hopefully. I wish for you that you had listened, and I hope that you did over the last year or 2 or 3 or 4 when I was cautioning about having long-term bonds or having too much in high-interest bonds that were risky. Even if you didn't know where the risk was built in, somebody else did. That's why they paid 6%. So those risky bonds and the long-term bonds have been crushed in the last 12 months. And again, the Fed made it perfectly clear. So I think the only thing that's going to stop it is that if we see an increase in unemployment, if we see a material decrease in the number of new jobs. So far, that has not happened. If you define recession simply by 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, we already met that criteria. I used to think that was the historical criteria of what a recession is, but apparently there's an organization within the government, the name escapes me at this moment, that decides when we are or are not in a recession. And things that they look at are the GDP, which was negative for the first and second quarter, second, third. Yeah, it had to be the first and second quarter of 2022. But during that time of very, very slight negative GDP, after really big GDP at the end of COVID, or at the end of the really serious when people were dying. I know they're still dying. Oh my God. I don't know how to phrase it. When COVID didn't seem as bad, maybe it's still as bad, but we kind of went back to our normal world and fuck it all. You know, you're going to get sick. You're going to get sick. Anyway, so those softening of the GDP weren't big, weren't bad, and were kind of expected because of the aggressive growth and big profits for companies and everything. So it hasn't really been called a recession yet. And we have unemployment at record lows. We have employment numbers coming in every month, every week that are better than expected. And those are signs of a strong economy, maybe too strong of an economy. And of course, there's concerns, genuine concerns, I think, that companies are allowing prices to drift up for increasing profit. And maybe if people buy a little bit less, maybe if people are a little more concerned, then there'll be pricing pressure on those goods and services that'll push them down. Of course, one of the big drivers that probably is not going to go away is the price of oil, which ironically is not that high. It's the price of gasoline that's really killing people. But a little bit of release from the federal oil reserves has helped a teeny bit, if nothing else, psychologically, where people don't think that gasoline is scarce or oil is scarce. But honestly, we're getting the screws put to us from people like Russia and Saudi Arabia, who have recently agreed to maintain and or decrease the supply of oil. So, I mean, you may not love wind turbines and solar panels and green energy like I do, but honestly, if you dislike being fucked by Russia and or Saudi Arabia and them dicking around with our economy or the price that you pay at the pump, you should be pushing for some way, for some system, for us collectively as a society or the government in a totality to promote ways for us to become independent of the global oil markets. And it's not as simple as just saying we won't sell our oil because, well, if you like capitalism, that's definitely not capitalism. I hear people, GOP friends that say we should put a cap on the price of gasoline at the pump. We've tried that in the past, people. Resulted in big gas lines, and it is not how you let businesses compete. It's kind of like socialism, which is kind of funny. So you want to control the prices. Anyway, I digress. So the Fed has increased the rate. It may go up more in the future. It's going to keep going up in the future until the Federal Reserve sees some dramatic reductions in inflation, higher unemployment rates, and much smaller growth in employment numbers on a monthly or weekly basis. And those things just may not happen in the next few weeks or few months. And so there's going to be more increases. But if suddenly it turns around, and the sad thing is that when it turns around, everybody's going to be excited and happy because now the economy has stopped being overheated. But that means a lot of people are losing or can't get jobs. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation at this point in time. But the effect that it has on the stock market, unknown. Absolutely unknown. How's the U.S. stock market being down 20 or maybe today 23, 24%? Is that the correct adjustment for what is to come? And then the market will just go up from here. I don't know. It's a long-term gain. And again, if you look at some of the long-term numbers, let me just look at this real quick. The S&P 500, 3-year performance, 8.12% per year. 5-year, 9.2% per year. 10-year, 11.66% per year. Those numbers are way down from where they were just a year or two ago, but it still indicates, in 5 and 10 years, the performance is still average 9 to 11 to almost 12% per year over the last decade. So if you've been in this a long time, you've made a lot of money. And if you don't panic, if you can add when prices are down, if you can just keep adding every year, you're going to be fine in the long run. But we have these times. And keep in mind, March of 2020, the stock market was down about 35% and then had fully recovered by the end of the year. So I don't know. Will this drag on for 2 or 3 years or start correcting tomorrow? Don't know. Long term. I've talked too much. I'm repeating myself. Let's take a break and get into the actual fun stuff in the show.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Jesus had a tough life. Boy, I read about that guy. Jesus is the only guy that ever came back from the dead that didn't scare the fuck out of everybody, man. He's the only guy that ever crawled out of a grave where people didn't go, oh, I just saw some fucker crawl out of his grave. Jesus comes back. He doesn't get any pressure. No static. Nobody's upset. He climbs out, he's walking around, nobody's upset. They can eat with him and everything, It's like, isn't that guy dead? Yeah, but he's real stubborn, man. He won't accept it. Pass the butter. What are they staring at? Yeah, I read it, folks. I read that book. He's on the cross. 30, 40 Christians standing around going, it's a shame that he has to die. And Jesus is going, well, maybe I wouldn't have to. Somebody get a ladder and a pair of pliers. I don't know if Jesus has actually spoken in an audible voice to anybody in about 2,000 years, folks. I think his last words may have been, oh, not the other one. Oh, you jerk. Oh. It may have been his last words. I'm not sure. Yeah, people say, you think Jesus is coming back? Sure. What's it been, 2,000 years? Boy, I sure don't want to dampen anybody's optimism here. It's only 2,000 fucking years. Yeah, he's coming back. He's gonna do game shows. They're gonna go, Jesus, this is your life. Remember this noise? Yeah. All right, don't tell me. Give me a second. He's up in heaven right now. They're going, why don't you go back down to earth? Be a symbol of peace and love to the world, help. And he's going, yeah, sure. Help, huh? Yeah, I'd like to help. Tell him I'll be there as soon as I can play the piano again! Thanks a lot, like being the only savior that can use his hand as a fucking whistle!
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. I've gotten several emails on how to rebalance the portfolio, and so I'm going to go over that and some of my thoughts on how to do that at this time, and this is November of 2022. Some of these ideas and thoughts will work at any time. Others are very specific to the end of the calendar year 2022 and what you might think about. And I'm doing this based on the Polaris plan. So if you don't know what that means, you're going to have to go back a couple of months and listen to the 6-part series. Yes, it's 6 different episodes, but the plan part of each episode is probably give or take 20, 25 minutes. So you could have a pretty good idea of what I do in under 3 hours, because it's all summarized there, all for free. And people, of course, side note, they ask, why in the fuck would I do this? Because I like it. I like to see myself as a consumer advocate. I'm trying to help people understand investing and do better and make more money in the long run, while, when possible, kind of controlling risk. We don't want to do anything too crazy. We don't want to be too conservative either. But anyway, that's the gist. So I'm assuming you understand and know the plan. If not, go back to those 6 episodes and you can take notes on this. A couple of assumptions that I'm working on. I may not remember to mention that most of the things I'm going to talk about are year-to-date numbers. Again, for this year, 2022. And we're talking about a $1 million portfolio. We're talking about somebody that's already in retirement in this example. And the money is in an IRA. Now, I mention that because I'm not going to complicate this with tax ramifications. So there'll be no taxes for any adjustments that you make. At the beginning of the calendar year, you had about 40% in bonds and 60% in stocks. And of the stocks, something close to 25 to 30% was international. And of course, in the bonds, most of it, if you have been following my scheme, my plan, my outline, most of the bonds, luckily, were in very short-term investments because of the concern of the possibility of increasing interest rates, which is exactly what happened. So there's a lot of assumptions built into this. Just real quick, at this time, at the time I'm doing this recording, the total bond market index as measured by Vanguard's total bond index fund, which is VBTLX, it is down 15.8 or 16% year to date. That is way worse than I could have ever imagined for that bond fund. Again, if you had a bulk of your bond money in short-term and conservative bonds, you've done a lot better. The Polaris plan At the beginning of the year, which is not really different than what I did this summer to explain it, the bond portion of that is down 9.5%. Again, I never expected that, but that is way better than 15.8. So the bond part of the portfolio outperformed the bond market by about 6% in the last, give or take, 10, 11 months. I'm really happy with the relative performance, but not happy with the absolute performance. The other thing that's funny is that the bonds are now a greater percentage of your portfolio than they were at the beginning of the year. And that's because the stocks went down more than the 10% or 15% you lost in bonds. If you had a lot of high risk or long-term bonds, that may not be the case for you. But in this case, the Polaris plan, the bonds went from 40% to 41.7. And this also assumes that your cash on hand is now getting low, and we haven't done any adjustments in at least 6 months. Generally speaking, if you're in retirement, I recommend people to keep 3, maybe 6, I'm even comfortable up to 12 months of cash flow in your retirement account and or at your bank. In this case, I assumed at the beginning of the year that we had about half, and this person is in retirement between the ages of 62 and 67, so they're taking out only 5% of the portfolio, and now the cash is getting low, and not only do you need to rebalance, but you need to create a little bit more cash. And the question is, well, Phil, if everything's down, where do I do that? Every single item that I have used in 2022 is down, except for cash. Cash made 1% or 2%. So that's kind of nice. But anyway, so let me quickly go to the U.S. stock market. If you were following the 60-40 split that I had been recommending for value versus growth, our return year to date is about minus 15.5. Yeah, that's right, minus 15.5. And just for reference, the total U.S. stock market is down 18.8 as of the time I'm doing this recording. And if you look at a different day, you're going to get a different number. Here again, we find ourselves to be quite fortunate, losing 15.5 versus 18.8. So 3.3% better than the total market. And there are some funds, as an example, the large cap growth, which was the best of the best for the last several years, is down 30%, even with some market corrections again in early November of 2022. The REIT position that I recommend is down 27%, and international bonds as a whole are down 24%. We will not be selling from international bonds, probably not be selling. And so you have the need to increase your cash on hand so that you can keep taking out approximately $4,000 a month, which is $48,000. Again, $50,000 would be 5% of the $1 million portfolio you had at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, you have about $820,000. You did take out cash every month, about $4,000. And of course, your portfolio is down about 15.6 or 16%. So, we're going to take that into account as a reality also. If you are more concerned because your portfolio went from 1 million to 820,000, if possible, you could reduce the amount that you're taking out. Ironically, as covered just a few episodes ago, cash flow, because of the dramatic increase in interest rates paid by the bonds that you have, has increased dramatically. It has gone from around 1 to around 4%. So in a way, your cash flow is going to improve, and this portfolio could spin off as much as, let's see, where's the total? About $28,000 in dividends a year. So if you're spending $50,000 and you're getting $28,000 from dividends, you only would need to spend or sell $12,000 worth of something to refill the cash on hand, because that's doing pretty well. A lot of your cash is getting refilled by the dividends from the bonds and the stocks. And the amount that's coming from the bonds has increased from 4,000 to almost 16,000. A dramatic improvement in your cash flow situation, which ironically or strangely, weirdly, even though your portfolio is much lower, the amount of money that, the amount of years that the cushion could last has increased. So you might find yourself in a position where the percentage of your portfolio that is the cushion has increased, and the cash flow from that has increased. And if you're doing the calculation like I talk about, taking into consideration all of the dividends from bonds and stocks to offset this $50,000 or 5% from $1 million deduction, you're doing okay. Everything is pretty cool. When you open your statement, it looks a little scary, but this is not the time to panic. But let's say you still want to rebalance and or create a little more cash. So some things to consider selling. I'm going to look at the items that are down the least. And so in the bonds, I would look at the short-term government fund VBIRX, and a short-term corporate fund VFSUX. They are both down 7% or more. But, if you want to take $5,000 or $10,000 out of each one of those, that would be an acceptable place, because the losses and the need to rebalance suggests that you take from there. From the stocks, I'm not going to reduce any of the international, because I actually have, since the beginning of the year, recommended increasing that to over 30%, maybe even as high as 35%. And that reduced itself just a little bit because it fell more than the domestic stocks. So we don't really want to sell any there. That those losses are pretty significant. And I want to try to give it some time to bounce back. So in the United States, stock positions, the stock index funds, one of the places you want to look first is VVIAX. It is down 4.5% year to date. 4.5%. That's not a lot. That, matter of fact, I think that's the single best performer in all of the positions that I recommend in the fully built out Polaris plan. So something like 10,000 maybe out of that. I would also look at maybe 15 even. But I would also look at the mid cap value and the small cap value, because mid cap and small cap growth have done so much worse. The value positions are now a little out of whack. It's not bad. And again, this is something where in a taxable account, we might want to really dig into the tax consequences and what those might be for you. Again, I'm assuming today that this is all in an IRA, so I'm going to ignore tax consequences. But they're real, and you should think about them. And you can look up the performance of these items over the years. And if you have the cost basis data in your account, you can look at and possibly pick and choose which individual shares you want to sell. So if somewhere in the last year or two or three, you added money to a position that you now want to sell, you might want to sell the newest shares first, because they haven't gone up as much. If you have shares that you've held for 10, 15 years, you've made a lot of money. As an example, VIGAX is up 12.7% per year for the last 2 years, including this year-to-date 30% drop. So if you sell really old shares that you bought 10 years ago, your tax consequences could start to add up. But anyway, back to the thing here. Keep it in mind that if you have enough cash on hand right now in November of 22, you might want to wait another month or two. And the reason for this is that December is generally the largest dividends of the year. Most dividends come at the end of, or just before the end of a quarter. They can come in any month, but at the end of the quarter is most common, and the end of the year, December, mid-December, late December is when the bulk of them come. So if this portfolio can spin off $28,000 in dividends, I would not be surprised that you receive $10,000 or more in dividends in December. And again, if you're taking out $4,000 a month, that's going to cover you for another 2.5, maybe 3 months with some cash that you have on hand already. But anyway, I'm going to look at creating something that is, maybe to refill the cash on hand by $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. We might, like I said, might do 10 grand each from the short-term bond positions. You might want to, making sure this is all right. Yep. And then VVIAX, which is the Vanguard Large Cap Value Fund, maybe 10 to 15 from there, and 5 to 10 from mid cap value and small cap value. So that's going to get us 10, 20, 35, 45, maybe $45,000, $50,000 that you're selling. Hopefully something at a loss of 5, 6, 7% compared to the beginning of the year. But keeping in mind, if you look back at 2 or 3 years ago, the net on this stuff is probably still a positive return. So don't freak out. Don't look at it as only your short-term investments. You're going to have to make decisions on where to go, and you want to try to sell what you need to sell to rebalance the portfolio. Again, if you're in a taxable account, keep in mind. And with that knowledge, then, what if you take out more cash, or if you sell things that are more than you need? I would then want to add, let's see here, about, I think 10,000 invested back into the Vanguard International Growth Admiral Share Fund, which is VWILX. And this will help kind of build back up the international. I've leaned towards an increased percentage. So adding 10,000 there or 15,000 there would increase that by several percentage points to try to get it back into balance. So there's the thing where you're not even taking money out. So again, the 2 short-term bond funds, value funds in the U.S., we're not selling anything in international, but we might add to the one position I would add to, because it's gone down 37%. Freaking awesome. You're not going to sell from there. You're going to add to there. So that's kind of where my head is at. I hope that helps during these rough times. If you find that your cushion is too big at this time, and we can have a discussion about that, you can always email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. Maybe you want to sell even more of the bonds that are down 6 or 7 or 8% and put them in stock positions that are down 15, 20, or like that one international growth down 37%. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning. Quick break. We'll go on with the rest of the show.
And they told me the story all about this guy named Lehi who lived in Jerusalem in 600 BC. Now, apparently, in Jerusalem in 600 BC, everyone was completely bad and evil, every single one of them, man, woman, child, infant, fetus. And God came to Lehi and said to him, "Put your family on a boat and I will lead you out of here." And God did lead them. He led them to America. I said, America? From Jerusalem to America by boat in 600 BC? And they said, yes. Then they told me how Lehi and his descendants reproduced, and over the course of 600 years, there were 2 great races of them, the Nephites and the Lamanites. And the Nephites were totally, totally good, each and every one of them, and the Lamanites were totally bad and evil, every single one of them, just bad to the bone. Then, after Jesus died on the cross for our sins, on his way up to heaven, he stopped by America and visited the Nephites. And he told them that if they all remained totally, totally good, each and every one of them, they would win the war against the evil Lamanites. But apparently somebody blew it, because the Lamanites were able to kill all the Nephites, all but one guy, this guy named Mormon, who managed to survive by hiding in the woods. And he made sure this whole story was written down in reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics chiseled onto gold plates, which he then buried near Palmyra, New York. Well, I was just on the edge of my seat. I said, what happened to the Lamanites? And they said, well, they became our Native Americans here in the U.S. And I said, so you believe the Native Americans are descended from a people who were totally evil? And they said, yes. Then they told me how this guy named Joseph Smith found those buried gold plates right in his backyard. And he also found this magic stone back there that he put into his hat and then buried his face into. And this allowed him to translate the gold plates from the Reformed Egyptian into English. Well, at this point, I just wanted to give these two boys some advice about their pitch. I wanted to say, okay, don't start with this story. I mean, even the Scientologists know to start with a personality test before they start telling people all about Xenu, the evil intergalactic overlord.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson. Of course, you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Joining me today, as promised, Susan Gerbic. She is in charge of the Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia and many other fun things that are all skeptical. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Phil. It's so great to be here, and boy, was it nice to see you at PsyCon.
That was so much fun. And was it 2 full years, 3 years since the last one?
The last one was in 2019. If only there was a psychic out there who told us that there would be, closed down for a couple of years, but no, there wasn't anyone.
It's a wacky thing. I kept making the mistake when walking around Flamingo, the hotel, the casino we were in, of saying, oh, yes, I remember this place. I was here last year. And my wife would be like, no, you weren't. Yeah, I was. No, it was 3 years ago. Oh, fuck me. How did that happen?
A lot of people were doing that. They were saying, last year. And it was like this weird dichotomy with like a time warp or something, that we kind of forgot that we were all locked down for 2 years.
Yeah, it's a very weird, and I know what's going to happen throughout the rest of my life. When I look back at something, I'm going to say, that was 5 years ago. Oh, no, wait, that was 7 years ago. I've got to always add back in the 2 missing years. It's, I wonder, not really the topic of our conversation, but that just popped in my head. What happens to the kids who effectively got shorted 2 years of education?
It's a serious problem.
Yeah, I mean,
it really is.
I'm worried that we have more than enough stupid fuckers in this country. I don't need more of them. But anyway, I digress. Like you said, we just got back from PsyCon 2022. Great fun, great speakers. The Flamingo is pretty fun, and it's really conveniently located. And I know you did a presentation, or at least someone in your group did a presentation about psychics, and that's a fun topic for us to discuss. So let's start with that. Tell me what's going on with psychics and what kind of mischief you've been up to.
Well, with this pandemic, the people, we call them grief vampires. Those are people who claim to speak to the dead, the mediums. They went online. They went into Zoom, and they started doing group readings. So my team, which is called the Guerrilla Skeptics, that just focuses on psychics, we went into Zoom also, and we were really busy. We did, since we weren't able to go out and attend these things in person, we were able to attend them all on Zoom. It was simple, it was inexpensive, and we were able to record them. So we did a lot of investigations. They're all on my website, abouttimeproject.org. And what people will find there is a large list of different articles I've written up about various different psychics. And we were able to watch them close up and watch them how they work. Very interesting. The wordplay they used to make it seem like they're real. You know, you can they do research on people, and we could do it in real time. So a psychic would go on, and they would pull somebody in from their screen of maybe 300 women, and they are almost all women, and they would pull somebody in, and it was always somebody with an unusual name, especially if it had a hyphenated name. You know, it had the maiden name in there.
Not like John Smith.
No, never like that. It's never like Joanne's iPhone.
Yeah.
Never like that. It's always like Melinda Jason King or something. You know, it's something like that.
Yeah.
And so they pull them in and they start doing a reading on them, and it's accurate as heck. I mean, like specific. Your father's name is Joe, and your sister just had an operation, and your dog's name is Charlie, and he's dying, and you know, it's very specific kind of things. And what we found is when my team and I are watching this, and we're watching it live in the same time as the psychic is doing the reading, we can find that same woman on social media, and we can look through her Facebook profile. It's almost always Facebook. And we can say, oh, yeah, there's the dog right there. You know, oh, look at that. Oh, wow, they're about to take a vacation, you know. And we could see that the psychic's relaying the same information back to them in real time. So this is called hot reading.
I was just going to say,
really simple to do.
They're not even trying cold reading now with this technology. It's hot reading.
Well, yeah, it's hot reading, but it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
They've always done hot reading, but some psychics are more likely to use it than others. There's a lot out there, like the John Edwards, the Teresa Caputos, and so on, who still use cold reading. They're old school. I mean, they'll go to hot reading if they get it, but they're not likely to
just
try to do it.
Just for the listener that may not be up on the lingo we're using, what's the difference between hot, warm, and cold reading? What does that mean?
Well, we don't really use the warm reading as much anymore. It's mainly just hot or cold. So typically most psychics use cold reading, which is wordplay, throwing out a lot of stuff that something will hit, and if it hits, then they go and zero in on it. Like they'll say, I'm getting a Steve. Who is Steve? Who is Steve? And then somebody will say, oh, well, that's my dad. And then the psychic will say, yes, that's who it is, Steve, because he's telling me this, you know. So it's general statements, also statements that are pretty much accurate to all people. You know, they could say something like, you know, you've been very stressed out lately, or you've got a lot of things you want to read and you can't seem to get to it. They're statements that seem specific, but they're not. They're actually general for everybody. A hot reading is when somebody has some kind of information on you ahead of time. And it could be as much as looking at your Facebook profile before you go to see a psychic, or it could be something as simple as you were going to an event and you're in the elevator and somebody else is in the elevator with you, and you're talking about maybe your trip to Hawaii or whatever you just got back from. And the person in the elevator who's just sitting there pretending they're looking at their phone works for the psychic. And then they just go and they say, that person over there, they just came back from a trip to Hawaii. And so that's an easy hot read that's just a chance. But when you have, if you were to attend an event and it's in person and there's 200 people in the room, they only need 2 or 3 hits to really be good. So if somebody's mingling amongst them, maybe waiting in line at the bathroom, and one woman tells the other one that she just found out her daughter's pregnant and expecting twins, and everybody's so excited it'll be the first grandchild on both sides. That bit of information that was overheard by other people in line may make it out into the show. So that's another form of hot reading. There's a lot of ways of doing it, but that's kind of the typical.
Well, and of course, they put on a little bit more of a show with that information. I mean, they don't just come out and say it. They warm everybody up, get the crowd amused. And of course, this is a crowd of people that want this to be true, generally speaking. And the psychic will say something like, oh, I'm getting a vision. And of course, if you have 200 women in a room, unless they're all teens or all in their 60s, you can say, I'm getting an impression that someone in here is pregnant. And of course, 1 or 2 women freak out because, oh my God, how did she know? But yeah, if I overheard that someone was having twins, oh my God, that would, I understand that someone's pregnant and someone has twins. I'm seeing two children, and the person who's pregnant that has just found out that they have twins just a week ago, they're hooked. And whatever you say after that is magic, because
Right.
what are the odds that they would randomly come up with that? Well, not even that low randomly, but it wasn't random. They had information. I know when I did cold reading years ago, and I've decided, I had a couple of bad experiences with cold reading, where I did too well, I did too good, and I came up with things that caused significant emotional distress for people, and I decided I was no longer going to do that. But what I would do is something like I see a name, and the name starts with like a D or an S, and of course I'm talking to one person. With a crowd, someone's gonna, like the S. It's Sam, it's Steve, it's Samantha. I mean, you have so many names, Susan, right? You have so many names that they could pull up. But I found even with an individual, if you're vague enough, between their 10 or 12 closest friends, family members, relatives, there's somebody that has that letter in the first, middle, or last name, and then they do the hard lifting for you. And as the psychic, you can just play off that. The other one you love to do is something about the number 3. Something, and then the person will go, well, my mom and dad and I all live together. That's 3. That must be it. Or they say, well, I only have my mom left. Well, then your dad is trying to rebuild the Trinity, the 3 of you together. So online now, is it easier for you guys to snoop and record than showing up in person? I'm guessing this is more
much
fun.
Easier. Yeah, I've got lots of recordings. And then we're able to, since we're able to record, we're able to go back and review and see how it appears to look like they're real. And it's very, very sad. To be honest with you, it's not entertainment.
Yeah.
We have people. I'm just doing an article right now where this one grief vampire is on a morning news station in Detroit, and they use the word entertaining or fun several times in the very short time he's on their segment. And I'm thinking, what, you guys have obviously never been to one of these events, because these people are desperate, they're lonely, they're vulnerable. Most of them are very vulnerable, especially during the pandemic. I mean, remember the first year of the pandemic, before we had a vaccine, and we didn't know if we would ever have a vaccine or how quickly. It was frightening, and people seemed to be dropping off all over the place. I mean, that's anytime I got together with friends on Zoom, that's what we talked about, is who's got it, who's next, who's lost someone. It was terrifying. And people would take their loved ones, especially their elderly people, to the hospital and drop them off, and then go home, and they never see them again, or maybe on FaceTime.
Yeah.
So it was an awful time.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening on these events. It was just an awful time to be alone.
Yeah, because
you're vulnerable. Or
a lot of people suffer with that and maybe aren't the best at making friends, and you only have a couple of friends. But when you suddenly are kind of a shut-in at any age, and you have to be careful, or you don't go out as much, that can really mess with you as a human, because we've evolved to be a social species, even when we deny it. But you need some kind of interaction, even if it's bad. But then these online things are a way to get in touch with something more meaningful, another level, or spiritual, or whatever you think it is. And like you said, they play games with people, but I'm assuming they play games with people for a reason, and that reason probably involves money. So how does that work?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, your audience would love to hear about this. Oh, my gosh, if you guys you could make so much money at this if you have no conscience, and if you think that you could go through this the rest of your life. I think you'd be totally screwed up if you had if you weren't narcissistic or something, I don't see how you could do it, but it is almost all cash. The one psychic I've been concentrating on the most lately, and you guys could read about him on my website, abouttimeproject.org, is he is using Cash App, he's using Apple Pay, and he just got thrown off of PayPal. And we think he got thrown off PayPal probably because he had way too many people trying to refund. We've been having people complain about it. So I think that might be why. He was using friends and family feature on PayPal so that he could avoid the
commissions.
fees.
Yeah.
And he was blatant about it. He would have on his on his social media, when he'd advertise for people to get a reading, he would say on there to use his mom's Venmo or his boyfriend's PayPal, but to use the friends and family feature. It was pretty obvious. So there's tons of cash in this, and there's no reporting, of course, because why would you do that? I mean, I guess you would report some of your income, but you're not reporting all your income. And credit card sales is, I think, a lower end of it. I don't think they're using a lot. We know that billions and billions and billions of dollars are probably turned over every year in the psychic world. It's a giant cash, a giant way of making money, like religion. It's a big way. Except that with psychics, you don't have to have a storefront, especially now that they're on Zoom. They don't have to have a website even. You could just go off of social media. There's no real overhead. You don't even have to have insurance.
Wow.
You don't have to have anything. It's very, very easy. And we're seeing also, again, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are becoming psychic readers, astrologers, tarot, all that. On TikTok is a new avenue for it, or they're using Instagram, and it's going after a younger and younger crowd. So it's a lot of competition out there right now. But there's so much money to make.
It's amazing. And before we go into the Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia, one more time, give us that website where they can watch the videos, and give it to me slowly because you got a lot of letters in there.
Oh, it is abouttimeproject.org.
Abouttimeproject.org. And they can go see where you've recorded like Zoom calls of psychics ripping people off.
Well, you can't. There are some out there. We don't reveal a lot of the videos because we don't want to reveal the person's name or their image. There are some. A lot of them are blocked out with their video as far as who you're looking at. But what we have done is a lot of investigations. During the pandemic, we did one with this one psychic who we do a lot of stings.
Yeah.
And the most recent one we did was Operation Onion Ring. And that was where the psychic went and he had an online reading with children ages 5 to 12.
Oh,
and there was 8 of them.
No,
Yeah, it happened. We have it recorded. We haven't released the video, but I've done a really interesting article on it, and it was pretty egregious. But in that psychic sting, we sent in somebody to sting him. In fact, we did it twice, and we have the goods on it. And that's in an article, Operation Onion Ring.
And is that already out?
Oh, yeah. We did this in 2021.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. Now, Guerrilla Skeptics on Wikipedia, what is that and what do you do?
Okay, so we are a Wikipedia editing team. We have been existed since 2010, I believe, 2011. And what it is I put together training. It is pretty extensive. It takes anywhere from 2 to 4 months to go through. We have all the training on Google Documents, and we have something called a secret cabal, which is located in a private Facebook group. So people can join my project, but they can't find it. They have to be invited. So you have to reach out to me. And what happens is I put you through this training program, and we teach you to become a Wikipedia editor, a really good Wikipedia editor. And we have, about 100 people. After SciCon, I think I've got 4 new signups that are just starting the training right now. And we edit Wikipedia pages on science, scientific skepticism, claims of the paranormal, and people of science. Those are the categories we are really focused on. Anything that has to do with paranormal, or it has to do with science, or people of science. And we've written just over 2,000 pages. And this morning I just looked, those 2,000 pages have just hit 125 million page views. So we focus on all kinds of things: vaccines, UFOs, chemicals, just zoos, botanical gardens,
Right.
birds, everything that you can think of that falls in that category. And we do 45% of everything we do is in languages other than English.
Wow.
So we really try to concentrate on just turning over Wikipedia and making sure the pages are in great shape. We do, we check for vandalism, and we go and we do those kinds of things as well. But mostly what we do is we create. And that's something that takes so much time. Most Wikipedia editors that are not in my project don't have the time to sit down and really write a page, which can take days to do if you're doing it right. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's been so much fun. The people in my community are wonderful people. Like I say, they're located all over the world. It allows people to do some sort of activism when they don't have a place to go, like they don't have a local group or they can't go to a conference. We have people in, Humpty Doo, Australia, all the way up in the very top by Darwin, Australia. We have people in South Africa. We have people in, just all over. They can edit Wikipedia just with an internet connection, and they have to have a Facebook account and some time to do it.
Well, I do know that, I don't know if it was 3 or 5 years ago, one of your team members made a Wikipedia page for Phil Ferguson, and it lasted for about 5 minutes, sadly.
Yeah. It's very complicated whenever we're dealing with people and you're making a brand new page, because the notability you have to have for Wikipedia is very intense. It's like you need a New York Times article written about you. That's kind of intensity to get a good Wikipedia page. It's not an easy thing. It has nothing to do with popularity. It doesn't mean you don't deserve it. It's just,
yeah. Are you notable?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wikipedia notability is completely different from being famous. And, my best suggestion is, if you robbed a bank or something like that, maybe you would get in the news. So if you're going to rob a bank and you do it in a clown outfit, you're most likely to get an article written about you in the New York Times or someplace like that, and then you can write a Wikipedia page.
Wow, great. I don't think that's the way I want to go. But maybe.
But that's what I mean. It's something different. You have to be different.
I'll figure something out, or I won't, because it's, it'd be kind of cute to refer to it, but doesn't change things. What other projects or things are you working on? Oh, before you even move to that, if someone thinks that sounds pretty cool and they like grammar and writing and correcting or building stuff with words, how can they reach you or someone on your team to get started?
Right. That's a great question.
Thank you
for asking
you
that.
Bet. And of course,
and
tell Susan that Phil Ferguson sent you. Go ahead.
Yes, of course, you would have to. So just to be clear, you do not have to be good at grammar and spelling and all that kind of stuff. There's always somebody who's going to watch over your shoulder who will fix all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not that person, but everybody has skills in some areas, and then I have a team, so they fill in the areas where you might be lacking. But the easiest way to get a hold of me is to reach me on Facebook. And I do that because I want to make sure people are on Facebook and they use it so that they can actually partake in the group. The more you are interacting with your peers on the Secret Cabal, the better experience you're going to have with the project and learning, and you'll make friends and you have more interaction with them. This is not a lone wolf kind of project. You're not going to do well if you're just trying to, barely be on Facebook and barely send an email once in a while. It's definitely a group thing. And they can reach out to me by my Facebook page. My name is Susan Gerbic, Gerbic. Find me there and send me a private message and a friend request and say, I heard you in the Phil Ferguson show, and I have I want to do this. It sounds really interesting. I need your email and I need your username. So you'd have to open up a Wikipedia account. And I want to know what languages you want to edit in. And I don't give a lot of instruction at the very beginning on how to find me, like including a link or anything like that. Because the whole idea is I want people who are okay with being not given the full instructions. They're okay with taking some initiative on their own. And they're like, I can figure this out. I mean, this can't be that hard to find me on Facebook. How to make a Wikipedia account is pretty easy. So,
I remember many years ago when I was in home delivery business, we would put out job offers or things in the newspaper or online, and people would call us and say, I'd like to come in for an interview. And I'd say, okay, well, great. It'd be this time at this address. And they'll say, well, can you give me the directions to that address? No. They go, what do you mean no? I go, well, if you're going to deliver appliances and or furniture on a truck, if you can't find this warehouse with just the address, I'm not hiring you anyway. So you're on your own. And some people would be so pissed off they just wouldn't bother. And I was like, perfect.
Yeah, it's a great way of weeding them out.
Yeah.
It's true. It is absolutely true. I have people who will join and they just don't, it's not what they want. It's not what they expected or they thought it was going to be more. I was going to hold their hand and say, okay, write this word here. No, you have to actually think about it and you have to write these words yourself. We'll guide you.
Yeah.
We'll give you lots of guidance
and
mentoring, but you are editing Wikipedia. You are educating millions of people with the words you write.
Yeah, so you're gonna have
to be able to do it.
Understand some things or learn about them and do some research and figure out how to document your research. I think it's a great skill, and it's something that someone who has maybe some free time but maybe not the means to go anywhere or a whole lot of money to do things, you can actually be very, very helpful, not just in the United States, not just in English, but wherever you are, whatever language you're proficient at. I think this is fantastic. So I love that. That's great. Now I'll go back to my question. What else do we have? What else are you doing that we want to talk about?
Well, okay. So if we have time, let's touch on two different things. So one of them is I've been working with the Center for Inquiry, which is the people who put on PsyCon.
Yep.
And what we're trying to do in the last few months is we're trying to regroup the groups after the pandemic. So there was a lot of groups, skeptic groups, humanist groups, atheist groups, all that kind of stuff that were existing, and we're really trying to focus on the United States, but there are all over the world. And so what we were doing is we found that a lot of groups were starting to fade before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, they just closed shop. They're gone. And their social media is gone. They haven't made a post on their Facebook page since 2019. They're, if they had a website or a Twitter account, they're mostly empty. Or there's a couple hanger-oners that are like, hey, I really wish we could meet in person again if only somebody would do something and arrange something. So those groups are pretty much gone. There are a few that managed to make it through the pandemic and are almost as strong, or if not stronger, because they embraced Zoom. They embraced online talks. They embraced what they could do with the pandemic. And so what the Center for Inquiry and myself are doing is right now we're going through and we're trying to find out if there's groups out there in the United States that are existing that need a little more help, or they are want to start a new group, or if there are individuals out there who are trying to find a group. And so they have a website, but it hasn't been really cleaned up for years. I mean, it's probably 5 years old, outdated.
Sure. I know about old websites. That's what I got.
So we're going through and we're trying to go through and see, clean it out. So we've been working on that for a couple months. The website is centerforinquiry.org. And I guess up in the corner you can click on groups and you can find a drop-down menu, and we're working in that right now. So if people are interested in starting a group or want to join a group or have a group and they want to make sure it's on the website and the information is correct, the contact information is on centerforinquiry.org's website. And so that's one thing we're really focusing on. We're hoping to come up with some groups, they don't know what to do with themselves once they try to form a group. I mean, it's social. You go have a beer, you have some pizza, have a coffee. I mean, that itself is great. But what we're finding is people want to do more, and they don't necessarily want to join the Wikipedia team. Like I said, that's more of an online thing. But when you're meeting in person, you have lectures. You can do a skeptic camp. You can do like table presentations at health fairs. You can, there's so many things they can do. But what we're trying to do is come up with, like a template, like a 3-month, 6-month guide for groups to be able to focus on a topic, like maybe superstitions. And that way that group can have a theme for a few months. They can meet in person or online, and they can we'll say, these are the books maybe to read, or a book. Here's some articles. Here's some discussion questions. Here's a video. We have a speaker who'll come in and Zoom with you guys and talk about superstitions and the history of superstitions. And then that one group, that body of people will have a lot better understanding about the topic. I mean, it could be UFOs, it could be ghosts, it could be climate change, it could be GMOs, it could be whatever. But we're trying to come up with some sort of little themed things that groups can pick up and say, this is the one we want to focus on. Skepticism in the media. How does the media manipulate us?
Right.
And they'll focus on it, and they'll really have readings and videos, and they can make their own timetable. Do they want to meet once a month or once a week, or do they want to meet online, or both, online and in person? And I think that's going to help build the groups up. And that's what we need to do, because we've got to become more, there's a lot of work to do, as you know. I mean, this pandemic was a nasty, it was awful on science.
Yeah,
we need to be better at better educated, better organized.
Yeah.
Know each other, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I honestly think that, I've been involved with this stuff 12, 15 years now. Part of me thinks that we're actually worse off than we were 15 years ago. And part of it is that through social media and websites and news channels that are not even trying to be objective, it's so easy for you to get trapped in your own little bubble and then just be convinced of the most crazy stuff. And again, compounded all that with COVID, because one of the ideas was, in the past, as an example, not something you guys cover, so forgive me here for a minute, but racism. In the past, if I said something really racist, hopefully one or more of the people around me would be like, no, dude, that's not cool. But now when you go online, you can find a group of people who think just as awful as you do, and you can say this awful stuff, and they're going to reward you for it. But anyway, I digress. Forgive me.
Well, we've always had that. It's just now it's online. It's easier. I mean, you used to be able to go hang out with your buddy of friends, and you could have talked like that if you wanted to.
That's true, but hopefully at least you were limited to the number of places you could do it, where online you can go anywhere. You said you had two things. One, of course, is the group finder, the group helper, the group maker. That's freaking awesome. What was the second thing?
Okay, so the second thing is we're working, I have my fingers in a lot of pies.
Yeah.
But one of them that we're working on right now is on facilitated communication.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure you guys your listeners don't know what that is.
Yes, they probably, well, many of them don't, so hit us up.
Okay, so what it is people who this is a pseudoscience that has existed for about 30, 40 years. And it's been disproven, it's been debunked. It's when a person who's severely autistic and unable to verbally communicate,
right?
And probably, maybe going some sort of schooling of some kind. But anyway, so these parents latch on to this idea that their child is a genius and can spell and can talk and can have conversations about politics and what to wear and, and what's on TV. I mean, they think their child is locked in. They think that autism is a motor skill problem and not something happening in the brain, right? Sensory or whatever. So what they think is happening is they bought into this pseudoscience where they think that if their child is just, their hand is held and guided to a keyboard or a letterboard, that the child will actually suddenly have this ability to spell and make grammatical sentences. And the child's had zero education, right? Zero education on how to spell or read and write. They suddenly, either by osmosis, by watching TV, know all about politics, or listening to the radio, or read the cereal box or something.
Sure.
Have these miraculous spelling.
Let me see if I can
abilities,
paint a picture, and correct me if I get any of this wrong. So you might have somebody who has a limitation, whatever it is, and limited ability to communicate with the people around them. And you have a caring family who wants them to be able to communicate and interact like an average person. And then you have a facilitator, which might be a family member or might be some kind of professional, and I have my air quotes up, that will then either hold the hand of the person with limited communication abilities and or have their hand held by this person, and they move the hand over the keyboard. And so you might have a child or an adult that has henceforth not been really able to put together a full sentence, suddenly starts writing paragraphs and being able to type out very sophisticated and advanced theories and communications on a variety of subjects that often they can't even possibly know about. And it could be that the facilitator doesn't understand the process of what's going on, and they truly believe that their hand is being moved, but in reality, when tested, it's them moving their arm and their hand for the person who has the communication disability. Does that sound right?
Perfect. You had that down. So as people become more adept at it, what they find is it doesn't even need to be a hand holding them, but sometimes they tug on their shoulder a little bit, or they hold the letterboard in the air in front of this child, and the child is pointing with a pencil or whatever, and so the letterboard moves to where the pencil is. So like the pencil's stationary, and the letterboard starts moving to where they want the letter to be touched. It's ideomotor effect. The facilitators mostly don't realize they're doing it. It's the Ouija board effect, clever Hans effect.
Yep.
And anyway, this is going on. So this is happening in colleges. Syracuse University is the hub of this right now. And so it's been discredited years ago. 30 years or more. And it's still being taught in the universities. And so we have formed a group with our leader is Janice Boynton, and you can go to facilitatedcommunication.org, and there is an extensive website that is really focusing on getting into the nuts and bolts of this. We're really infiltrating and researching and holding their feet to the fire. So it's an exciting time because it seems like we're making inroads and fighting the fire, because it's cruel. People say, what's the harm? And there's a lot of harm in facilitated communication, and it goes by other names. It goes by spelling to communicate, hand over hand, and other names. They come up with new names as one name becomes like out
of favor.
There's a lot. Yeah, out of favor, they change it to another. Oh no, we're not doing facilitated communication. We're doing hand over hand.
Yeah.
And these kinds of things. And so right now is an exciting time, because if you want to read about it on Wikipedia or the website facilitatedcommunication.org, you'll find that we're starting to fight back. And it's been exciting because a lot of scientists, they write academic journals, they write a book or something like that, but that's not getting into the areas we need it to get into. That's educating other academics who probably wouldn't have fallen for it anyway. So now we're starting to get into the mainstream a little bit more, and we're starting to take on and challenging it. We're really it feels like we're starting to get somewhere. And
Yeah.
it's taken us probably about 5 years to find our feet, to get a group together that's really expert enough or knowledgeable enough or tenacious enough to make some changes. So I think that this is a good time. If you want to watch something happen, this is a good one. So the psychic world that I'm involved with, lots of things are changing. It's, you can read the takedowns I have on these psychics and how we're really fighting back. So if you like that kind of thing, Phil, I feel like I'm in a world where there's no repercussions. And every morning I get up and I look at the news and I'm depressed. Every night I go to bed and I think, gosh, what the heck? Not another thing. And there seems like there's never anybody held accountable. But in this world of scientific skepticism, in some areas, we're really, it's a long haul. It sort of feels like we're starting to win the war. We've lost so many of the small battles, but it's starting to feel like we're getting somewhere. And it's pretty exciting.
I'm going to wrap up on that high note. I love it. Everybody, Susan Gerbic, Gerbic. Find her if you can. If you want to help out on one of these multiple wonderful, delightful projects that she is involved with and or organizing, let her know. You have an opportunity now that you maybe didn't know about, dear listener, where you can actually try to move us forward a little bit and try to fill in that gap that Carl Sagan had talked about many years ago, the concern that as technology gets more advanced, the bulk of the population may not be able to process and understand how things work. We need communicators. We need people to help uncover the facts, the reality, expose the charlatans and the liars, and help to write it all down so other people can find it. Anything else that we want to throw in last minute here, Susan, before we part and I let you on with your day?
Well, please visit us at abouttimeproject.org. And, Phil, we've got to see, I saw you and Robin at PsyCon, but
Yeah.
It's been too long. We
I
didn't
know
even have that much time to talk. These conferences are just too intense. There's so much going on. You say hello in the hallways about as far as you get. But thank you so much for letting me on your show. I hope I'll be able to come back and, not 5 years or whatever it's been since the last time.
Great. Well, Susan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show today. I'm going to keep this closing thing nice and short because we've had so much good stuff already today. If you like the show, you can go leave a 5-star review somewhere. You can share it with your friend. You can share it on Facebook, on Twitter. Oh my God. Oh, no, I'm not going to do it today. We have to talk about Twitter. But share the show, share some love, leave a positive comment, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to wrap it up because it's already too long of a show. I do thank you for listening, and I do hope to see you at an upcoming event. Until then, ciao.